At UFC 296, we have Paddy Pimblett versus Tony Ferguson. This is some of the weirdest matchmaking I've ever seen. But today we're going to question, is Paddy Pimblett overrated or underrated? But before we get into that, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe as we have brand new videos every single week. So, Mark, my question to you is Paddy Pimblett over or underrated?
It would be easy for me to say overrated, but I don't really believe that's the case, because you look at the rankings don't mean anything, but let's just go off them for a moment. So he's unranked, and the fights that he's been doing, if he wasn't such a big name, we wouldn't even be paying. We'd just say, oh yeah, he's doing all right. Yeah, he's on a bit of a win streak. But it's because he's such a big name, you can't help that he's that popular. Whether it's the accent, the floppy Beatles hair, all this kind of stuff, when he was throwing up in Cage Warriors, all that kind of stuff, why people know him. Oh, he's that guy. So there's that many eyes on him. He's still just learning, in the sense that he's only 26 or something. So I don't know if I'd call him overrated in the sense, but it's just more, there is a hype train and you think, slow it right down yet. We don't know yet, So I don't know if it class is overrated. Do you get what I mean?
No, I do. I agree with you exactly. Because I actually think now, with the place that Paddy's in, I think he's a little bit underrated now. I feel fans have turned on him so quickly. They're all talking about him as though he's washed. He's only 28. He's a young kid. He's got a long time left. And if he can make some improvements, I think we could see something special out of this. Or he'll just flounder in the mid-card. So we'll have to wait and see. But I just don't think it's fair on Paddy to give him so much abuse because he's not as good as you were hoping, or if he's famous, he's famous. It's just the way it is. Get over it. That's what I think anyway.
I think when we've said it's a lose-lose, the only way I can see that if Paddy can get away, if he beats Tony, is to drop the act of the this is light work and fight of the night, all this kind of stuff, because especially after his last performance, that's how fickle fans are. They can just turn on you exactly like that, because he was loved up until then. But then you got, and like you said, on his wedding day, you got people calling him out, oh, you lost to Jared Gordon, like, oh, leave off it, seriously. But if he goes over, I'll give him that, he's been respectful up until now, because you've got to be very careful, because like you said, Tony Ferguson fans, they're weird. To be honest,
they're El Kukui as well.
They're like Reek with Ramsay in Game of Thrones, just like, oh, good Tony Ferguson fans, wild. But I honestly think that, because he's been respectful up until now, he's saying, regardless of the last 6 fights, he's still El Kukui, he's still Tony Ferguson. He remembered watching him growing up. Rather than spinning round with Molly McCann on his shoulders and spinning his whatever around and all that kind of stuff, if he remembers where he is, I think he might get out with a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right there. If he comes out humble and doesn't act like the way he did in his last fight, we could see a resurgence of him. But let's take a quick look at Paddy's fights, because that's the thing, isn't it? Out of his last 4, he's had 3 finishes, and people talk about him as though he's some terrible fighter. It's like, what is going on? I think UFC fans can be just so fickle sometimes. They're so quick to turn. But like we said, let's look at his previous fights. When he came out and fought Luigi, I think he got, was it a second round finish or a first round finish? I don't remember. Either way, it was quick. Yeah, his debut fight.
Second, I think.
Yeah, it was nice and quick either way. And we could see how good he was as a grappler, but he seemed to have some issues with his boxing. He kept putting his chin in the air, and he did get caught. When Paddy came into his next fight, did you expect to see some big improvements from that chin and sort of fix those flaws?
Yeah, the way I saw his debut fight was he rushed in, and then when he gets clipped, you're like, oh, nearly. And so then it just seems like, right, back to the drawing board. Let's just calm down here. Do you remember the famous, like, I'm a Scouser, we don't get knocked out, and Bisping straight away, well, you almost got knocked out in the first round. Let's not forget that. But yeah, I think it was good for him to go back to the drawing board and, take some real adjustments and take everything a little bit slower.
Yeah, definitely. And then he came back and he fought Vargas, and he still kept getting caught though. And then he fought Jordan Levitt, and I think this is here where we saw that Paddy, had some little holes in his grappling as well. Paddy did get the finish, but he seemed to be struggling quite a bit. And do you think that kind of put the writing on the wall that Paddy's perhaps not as good as we were all expecting him to be?
Well, it's a strange one because obviously his debut, the world was watching because he's a big name. After that, the Levitt fight.
Yeah.
Don't forget that was UFC London. So the world was behind him there as well. Yeah, so everything's so anticipated. You could almost argue that he was like set up to failure as soon because he gets projected right up until the main card, doesn't he? In an American audience where people, it's enemy, it's a hostile environment. So you could argue that, but yeah, there was a few. But then again, maybe that's just testament to the high level of skills that are in the UFC. It's not a lack of skills by one fighter. It's just testament to the wide range of skills in the entire UFC. That could be the case.
Yeah, and it's like when I was talking about Shavkat earlier, and it's like, right, or Jeff Neal gave him slightly more trouble than I expected it to be. So he's not that good, and it's just we're all so fickle out going, right, these fighters are perfect all the time, so they're crap. It's not the way it works, is it? You can, all fighters get caught. They all get in trouble sometimes. I think it's testament to show that how good Paddy actually is. Even when he's get caught, even when he's struggling on the ground, he can still get the win, and in quite spectacular fashion. Though a fight people think he didn't get the win in, he came out and fought Jared Gordon. Mark, do you think this was the real final nail in the coffin for Paddy and sort of this wild hate he got, and whether perhaps he's not as good a fighter as we were all hoping him to be?
Well, again, I'm not sure if it was his fault entirely. I seem to remember a fight backing out on there, so he was the core main event. Jared Gordon and Paddy Pimblett, two unranked guys, are the core main event.
It was exactly Glover and Yuri. Glover and Yuri pulled out.
Right, yeah, there you go. Well, so obviously the world is watching again.
Yeah.
And I watched Michael Bisping's breakdown on Paddy Pimblett with the Jared Gordon fight, and I agree with him entirely. He says if he didn't do the all, I still think I won and all this kind of stuff, you can watch that back. I swear, how the hell do you think Paddy won? You can go off technicalities and stuff, but it's such a far reach to make a claim that Paddy won that fight. Well, I swear it was just because of the hype train.
I think he did win, to be honest.
Really?
I do think he did win that fight, but not from anything special. I think if you look at the statistics, he did get more strikes in that third round, but it's because Jared Gordon was so inactive. He was just holding him up there, not doing anything. So Paddy did get more strikes in, and that's why he just scraped it. But it's one of those where it really could have just turned 50-50 for me. I can see where people go, I don't see how Paddy won, but I don't see how anyone can say Jared won either. What did Jared do to win that fight? To
be fair, he clipped him with six big left hooks.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, but this is a round by round basis, isn't it? It's not based off the whole fight, That's the problem. That's the big difference. And it's, for me, that's why I can't think, right, Jared definitely won either. It was such a flip-flop fight, and I can see, okay, Paddy won because he did get more strikes off in that final round. And if Jared had just stepped his foot on the gas, he'd have won quite handedly, I think.
It's a strange one because you go, well, it goes back to that grey area of judging again. Because you go, is it damage that trumps all then? How many times have we heard that? But when the shoe's on the other foot and it doesn't quite fit that narrative, someone goes, well, it's the amount of strikes. And you're like, we need solidified rules or at least to hold judges accountable. I swear that you could hold judges accountable, or even introduce two more, have 5 judges. Mind you, that's two more chances to get it wrong, but you understand what the logic was behind that. That fight was just a fight, to be honest, and it was only because it was in front of the world stage that so many people was outraged at the decision. If that was the early prelims on a fight night, we still wouldn't be talking about it.
You're 100% right. And it's what you said earlier, didn't you? You said it's because of Paddy's name value. That's why so many people are paying attention to that. Nobody would have cared. Literally, we wouldn't have even batted an eye. Yeah, whatever. A crappy decision on a prelim. Who's bothered, right? And, and to give Paddy a little bit of credit, he did damage his ankle right at the start of that first round, and he still managed to give Jared Gordon some problems and do pretty well through the fight. Think, oh well, for me, it's not an excuse. If you come out and you get injured, that's part of the fight. Get over it.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, a full healthy Paddy may have done a little bit better. But with Paddy, Mark, do you think that he can ever sort of fulfill the potential of his career, or do you think he'll just sort of flounder in the mid card forever?
No, I think he definitely does have the ability, but when we compare Paddy to, say, the likes of Michael Chandler, it's like man and boy, isn't it? Quite literally, that's how it seems. And you just think, how's he going to cope with the monsters that are at the top of this division? Right now, Tony Ferguson, name value is great for him, but not going to be great in the fans' eyes, if that makes sense. No. Great for his stock anyway, for diehard Paddy Pimblett fans. But I don't know really. I think this next fight will tell. Ask me after 296 and I'll be able to answer you.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. And that's the thing, is it? We can see where Paddy is after this and what his potential is. But let's turn this on its head now, Mark. Let's look at Tony Ferguson. Do you think he's over or underrated as a fighter?
Oh, it's a cruel question, Dwayne. I'm going to say overrated, if I'm totally honest, because you've got to look at the full career, don't you? Yeah. Impressive win streak, but, where are those fighters now? What happened to them? I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to pass it over to you because I can already feel the hatred.
Yeah, you might feel the hatred, but it's coming to me as well, Matt, because I agree. I think Tony Ferguson is overrated as well. I think if you look at his career as a whole, yes, he had a fantastic little run, but, you can't ignore a 6-fight losing streak. You just can't do it. I think with Tony, rather than looking at Paddy in sort of individual fights, it's easy to break Tony down into two separate fighters almost. You've got 12-fight win streak Tony, which puts him in the top 10 of the most fights in a row in the UFC. And then 6-fight losing Tony, who puts him, I think, second for the most fights lost in the UFC.
BJ Penn, I think that's the first one.
Number 7. Yeah, he's number 7. Number 1 with 7. So Tony, if he loses on Saturday, will be tied for first. So how can you have these big, huge disparity in records, And it's a real shame, isn't it? So first, let's talk about his wins then, and let's go a bit of a positive look at it. So his notable wins are like Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, RDA, Cowboy via blowing his nose, and as impressive as Tony's sort of win streak was, do you think the caliber of fighters he fought is enough to warrant the high standard that people put him to?
There's a yes and no answer to that. I think both of them could be justified, because imagine being a Tony Ferguson fan during that win streak. You think he's going to the top, he's going to get it all done. Anthony Pettis is no joke. RDA, he was a champion. Cowboy, everyone loves Cowboy, but he was great once of a day. But again, the same thing happened to Cowboy, didn't it? Got two versions of that fighter as well. So you could argue with that. I can see why people want to hold him in high regard, but I do not see how people can still claim that he is still 12-fight win streak, Tony. No. You've got to be able to just call it a day, don't you? I've used this analogy so many times. Take old Yeller behind the sheds and put the bullet between his eyes now. It's done. It's over. He's not that same fighter.
Yeah, he isn't, unfortunately. But even though it's tricky, with Tony, he was this great 12-fight win streak fighter, really high level, but Tony never became champion. And he missed out on fighting Khabib and Conor. Do you think, Mark, he'd have beat either of those guys to become champion anyway?
I do not see how he beat Khabib. Looking back now as well, there was a guy where I used to train. He said Tony Ferguson takes that fight, because this was one of the many times that fight was arranged, And I'd never seen it at the time, but more decisively now, I think Khabib would have battered him. Conor, I could see more of a chance for him, but I could still just see Conor being able to slice through him, But at the same time, Tony's chin aside from Michael Chandler finding that point, he could take a pounding, takes more of a pounding than Tito's wife. He's a bit disgusting, really.
What is this? Northern Lights After Dark, man? Disgusting, vile.
I don't really know. Tito hasn't been relevant for however long, has it?
I know he's just catching strays anyway. But I'm thinking the same as you, to be honest. With Tony Ferguson, I think his fans are lucky that he never fought Khabib and Conor. I think Khabib would have mauled him. He would have literally destroyed him. And I think Conor would have found his chin and just kept repeating it on loop. And just, I don't know if he'd have knocked him out, but he'd have kept finding it and he'd have kept just peppering him up. I think it could have been very similar to Conor versus Nate too. That sort of, right, I'll keep whacking him. He'll get back up. I'll keep whacking him. And we'll just get that on loop over and over and over again.
I don't think you'd have had the running away with Tony Ferguson, though. I don't think it would have been needed, to be honest. I've got a theory that I think that why people love him so much is because he's so unorthodox. He's so wild. His training, his fighting styles, everything. He just seems so... He's so wiry, loose, and it's so unusual that people like, oh, who's this guy? He's cool. And maybe that could be it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sounding like a hater against people's favorite fighter, but I don't really care. I don't like the guy. I don't see the big appeal. So why do I care?
I like watching Tony fight. Like you were saying, he's got a very interesting style. He throws out some wild stuff. But I've never been that big Tony fan, ever. I always thought it was so weird in the press conferences. I've never enjoyed much of what he's got to say. He's not the fighter for me, really. But so let's move on then, Mark, to version 2 of Tony. 6-fight losing streak, and 4 of those have been a finish. Mark, what do you attribute being the real downfall of Tony? What do you think it is?
I'm not sure, and I don't think anyone bar Tony would be able to figure that out. David Goggins might be having quite the go at it right now, but we'll see how that goes. Because obviously it was Justin Gaethje in 2020. Aside from one uppercut at the end of the second round, Gaethje, it's like he took something from Tony that no one knew could be taken. It was a strange, and mercifully it got stopped. And if you remember, the last punch that was thrown was a jab, but Tony reacted to it in a strange way where you think, yeah, that's justified. Let's stop this. After that, was it? It was Oliveira, was it? Oliveira or Beneil, then Chandler, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Because all 4 of those guys have nailed him. But then look, there was moments in those fights, but moments aren't enough to get it done. Evidently, it was so, the offense to defense was so out of sync that I can't really determine what it is that he lost. But have you any closer? Have you got any theories?
For me, I guess it's a combination of multiple things. One, he got older. I mean, everyone knows that. He's an older guy. His fight IQ is not there. His physicality is not there. But I also think it's a real step up in competition. I think when you beat people like, Kevin Lee and like Cowboy and RDA, who are just really sort of hit and miss fighters. 1 week they're winning, 1 week they're losing. Then you're going up against the top, like Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil, maybe not Beneil anymore, but when you're losing to that caliber of fighter, it's fine. That's these guys are the best of the best. It's why it's such a tough division. And I think he just finally took that big step up in competition, and he just couldn't handle it. He's not that high elite level fighter that people think he is. And I think that's simply what it comes down to. And then he just continued to deteriorate, because then when he fought Nate Diaz and Bobby Green, like, honestly, the Bobby Green fight, even for me, even though I'm not a Tony fan, it was heartbreaking to see. I went, well, Bobby Green's crap. Tony Ferguson should do him in. And Bobby battered him from pillar to post. I couldn't believe, like, literally, it felt as though Tony, it wasn't even necessarily his physicality let him down. It was his mind. It was just like, what are you doing? You're doing such stupid stuff. I didn't get it.
Well, I think that's maybe why he's got David Goggins in for a mindset reassessment. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't think cardio is his problem." You're like, "No, you don't get it. It's his mindset, his approach to this new situation."
Yeah.
But imagine, Dwayne, imagine if Tony does beat Paddy.
No matter what, win, lose, or draw, he has to be his final fight. I do not want to see Tony fight again now. And the problem is, if he wins, it's going to give him too much confidence and he's going to re-sign and it's going to be just a massacre. I don't want to see it happening. But overall, I think it's lose-lose for both guys in this. I think it's a fight that's going to be fun to watch. The build-up's going to be really fun. But if Paddy wins, who cares? If Tony wins, I just think it's going to set his career down an even worse path. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for tuning in. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really does help us out.